It is the morning of December 7th, 1941, above the calm waters of Pearl Harbor, and the aircraft rising to meet the incoming Japanese strike are the fighters the United States Navy actually possessed that day. Brewster Buffaloes and Curtiss P-40s, competent machines against the aircraft of a few years earlier, but outclassed in speed, climb, and maneuverability by the Japanese Zeros, now sweeping over the anchored battleships below. Within 2 hours, 8 battleships have been damaged or sunk, and the American Pacific Fleet has suffered the worst single defeat in its history. In the years since, a question has occasionally circulated among aviation enthusiasts, prompted by newsreel footage of an extraordinary circular-winged aircraft that would later be nicknamed the Flying Pancake. Could this strange machine, capable of astonishingly low stall speeds and rapid climbs, have been in the air over Oahu that morning, and might it have changed what happened? The honest answer, and the starting point for the real story this documentary tells, is that it could not have been, because on the morning of the attack the aircraft did not yet exist, even as a completed prototype. Its first flight lay nearly a year in the future. What actually connects this unusual aircraft to Pearl Harbor is not a missed rescue, but a shared context. A Navy searching in the desperate years that followed the attack for fighters that could take off in the shortest possible distance, climb faster than anything then in service, and give carrier task forces a fighting chance against exactly the kind of surprise assault Pearl Harbor had demonstrated was possible. Understanding why that promising aircraft never reached frontline service reveals as much about the limits of radical engineering as it does about the war that shaped its development. The aircraft's origins predate Pearl Harbor by several years and lay not in any single crisis, but in the theoretical work of Charles Zimmerman, an aerodynamicist who had studied low aspect ratio, near circular wings for their unusual handling characteristics well before the United States entered the war. Zimmerman's research suggested that a sufficiently broad, disc-shaped wing, combined with propellers mounted at its tips to counteract the airflow disruption such a shape would otherwise cause, could produce an aircraft capable of extremely low stalling speeds and correspondingly short takeoff and landing distances, a property of obvious interest to a Navy whose fighters had to operate from the limited deck space of an aircraft carrier. Vought secured a Navy research contract in 1939 to develop Zimmerman's theories into a flying prototype, work that continued through the early years of the war, even as the Navy's more urgent, immediate fighter requirements were met by conventional designs already in production. The problem this unconventional aircraft was meant to solve was not a sudden wartime emergency, but a longer-standing tension in carrier aviation. Fighters fast and powerful enough to compete with the best enemy aircraft tended to require longer takeoff runs and higher landing speeds, both of which made carrier operations more hazardous and limited how quickly a squadron could get airborne in response to an attack. A design that could shorten that response time, without sacrificing performance once airborne, offered a genuine, if unproven, advantage. The first flying example of Zimmerman's concept, designated the V-173 and known informally from the outset as the Flying Pancake owing to its nearly circular wing, made its maiden flight on November 23, 1942, piloted by Vaught's chief test pilot, Boone Guyton. The aircraft was small and lightly powered, fitted with 2 Continental engines, driving large propellers connected by extension shafts running out to the wingtips, and its unusual tricycle undercarriage held the fuselage tilted nose up on the ground, giving it an ungainly appearance that belied genuinely promising flight characteristics once airborne. Over roughly 190 test flights conducted through the following years, the V-173 demonstrated the low-speed handling Zimmerman's theory had predicted, reportedly able to remain nearly stationary relative to the ground in a sufficiently strong headwind. A characteristic Navy observers found striking even as they recognized the aircraft itself was far too small and underpowered to serve as an actual combat fighter. On the strength of these results, the Navy contracted with Vought for a larger, combat-capable development of the concept, designated the XF-5U-1 and nicknamed the Flying Flapjack, intended to carry serious armament and to reach genuinely competitive fighter speeds while retaining the short-field performance that had made the smaller prototype so distinctive. The XF-5U One proved considerably harder to bring to completion than its smaller predecessor. Fitted with two far more powerful Pratt & Whitney engines driving the same wingtip propeller arrangement, scaled up substantially in size. The aircraft was projected to combine a genuinely high top speed with an extraordinarily low stalling speed, a combination that, if achieved, would have been almost unmatched by any conventional fighter design of the period. In practice, the propeller drive system, transmitting engine power out along extension shafts to the wingtip propellers, proved a persistent source of vibration and mechanical difficulty during development, and the aircraft's weight grew steadily beyond early projections as structural and equipment requirements were added, eroding some of the performance advantage the design had originally promised. Wartime material shortages and the Navy's understandable prioritization of aircraft types already in mass production further slowed progress, meaning the XF-5U, one airframe, was not completed until 1945, by which point the war had originally been conceived to help fight was drawing to a close. If you're enjoying this journey through history, subscribing genuinely helps us continue bringing remarkable, true stories like this to the channel. Ground testing of the completed prototype continued into the following years, but the aircraft never undertook a powered flight test. Its program formally canceled by the Navy in March 1947, and the completed airframe was subsequently scrapped. Set against the conventional carrier fighters it might have supplemented, such as the Grumman F-6F Hellcat and the Vought F-4U Corsair, the Flying Pancake's projected short-field performance represented a genuinely distinct advantage no mainstream design of the period could match, though this advantage remained theoretical rather than demonstrated in combat conditions, since the XF-5U, one never flew. Its more consequential comparison lies with the jet aircraft that emerged in the war's final years and its immediate aftermath, including early operational jets such as Britain's Gloster Meteor and Germany's Messerschmitt Me-262, where Zimmerman's design sought to solve the problem of short takeoff and landing distances through unconventional aerodynamics applied to a piston-engined airframe. Jet propulsion was rapidly demonstrating far greater raw speed potential through an entirely different engineering path, one that would soon reshape naval aviation requirements altogether and render the specific performance advantages the Flying Pancake offered considerably less decisive by comparison. The wider historical impact of the V-173 and XF-5U, one program, is, by most historians' assessment, modest and largely confined to the specialized history of experimental aerodynamics rather than any lasting influence on operational naval aviation. The Navy's cancellation in 1947 reflected not a failure of Zimmerman's underlying theory, which the V-173's flight testing had substantially validated, but the arrival of jet propulsion as a more immediately promising avenue for the kind of performance gains the Navy now sought. Some historians of aviation engineering note the design's low aspect ratio principles as an early and instructive case study in circular wing aerodynamics, though direct lineage between this program and later vertical or short takeoff aircraft designs remains a matter of some historical debate rather than established fact. The original V-173 prototype survived the cancellation of its larger successor and, following an extensive restoration, is preserved today and displayed to the public, one of relatively few tangible reminders of a program otherwise documented chiefly through Navy contract records, test flight logs, and period photographs. Return, then, to that morning over Pearl Harbor and to the honest limits of what any account of the Flying Pancake can claim. It was not there, and it could not have been, its story only beginning in earnest as the United States absorbed the lessons of that attack and searched for fighters that might respond faster to the next surprise assault. What Zimmerman and the engineers at Vought ultimately produced was neither a failure in any simple sense nor the missed savior of popular imagination, but a genuinely inventive answer to a real problem in carrier aviation. Undone in the end, not by any flaw in its central idea, but by the arrival of an entirely different technology that made its particular solution unnecessary before it ever had the chance to prove itself in combat. The Flying Pancake's true significance lies exactly there, in the space between a validated theory and an operational aircraft. A reminder that in wartime engineering, being right about the science is never quite the same thing as arriving in time.